I have gone through every Space Marine datasheet with the context of 11th edition, so you don't have to. So when we get into a new edition, it's really critical to try and review as many of the new datasheets as possible. Now, if you are a Space Marine player, that leaves you with a heck of a lot of datasheets to have to go through. We really do have an absolute suite of sheets that we can use, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing. But equally, that amount of decisions can leave you with decision paralysis. So what this video will aim to do is break down what you need to know and why you need to plan for certain lists with certain models, because otherwise you may end up with a lot of models sitting on the shelf, like I certainly know that I do upstairs, and no one likes a massive pile of shame because halfway after building the box they realise that it's actually just complete rubbish. So we are going to go through every single data sheet with the exclusion of the Hammerfall Banker, because we all know where that sits, and we're going to break down what makes it good, why it might be in a certain tier, and what makes it poor, what makes maybe 11th edition more of a home for it, all those kinds of details, so we can really get into it, understand what makes a good data sheet, so if we get any new ones coming out, we will then be able to judge them against that accordingly. I think this is a really critical exercise to do early with 11th edition, and to be honest, coming away from this video, you should have a really good idea about what Dark Angel sheets are really going to thrive and which ones are going to fall away. It's critical that we do this with the context that we do have points coming. If something is critically undercosted, amazing, perfect. It could be chef's kiss. However, we are doing this just on the quality of data sheet to see if it is going to be enough. So we are still using the points that we currently have, so that we have some kind of context. We know that there'll be a few data sheets going up. We know there's a few data sheets that will be going down. For example, Desolation Marines are pitched to actually get a massive drop. So I think there's going to be a little bit more flex when it comes to this, but this is a good starting place for you. By the end of the video, you'll have a really nice concept of some proper good data sheets. Now, of course, we always need to begin somewhere, and unfortunately, we are going to be starting with the losers. Now, what I'm going to do on each of these sheets is kind of do a little breakdown. Some of these will be reasonably explanatory. Things like the Dark Shroud, obviously, that is going to be an F tier because it gives both the benefit of cover and the benefit of cover because of the changes with 11th edition. Unfortunate. So that's kind of where we find ourselves. However, with these slightly more spicy options, I will break them down. Now, this is very much in the context of 11th edition Dark Angels. So if you want to see a little bit more about how we're building our lists, what dispositions work for us, check out some of my other videos. Make sure that you're going back and watching those videos before you come to this one. I'll wait. I'll give you a minute. I hope you've done it now. So we're going to go through all of that and try and make sure that we understand the context surrounding why these data sheets might end in that tier. But equally, if you disagree with me, then tell me down below and we can have that conversation, work out that dialogue and see actually who was right. There's already been one hot take that I've taken, which was the plasma detachment being bad, that I'm already starting to think I might have got wrong. So there's more reason to have those conversations than I think to not. So please don't just go, oh no, he's stupid. Just let's talk about it. Let's work it out. So in F tier, we have Lazarus, the Dark Shroud, the Dark Talon, the Blade Guard Ancient, the Captain in Phobos, the Captain in Terminator, Centurion Assault Squad, Company Heroes, that's a bit of a shame, Devastator Squad, Dreadnought, Drop Pod, Firestrike Turret, Reaver Lieutenant, Razorback, Rhino, and Tactical Marines. Now, there's a couple of things that very much could change here. So the Company Heroes, if in our codex they were to change to be led by Azrael, suddenly that unit becomes absolutely incredible. Now, I've wanted that ever since we were indexed Dark Angels. Obviously, we had it for a very short amount of time, and then Games Workshop brutally took it away from us, which was very upsetting. And unfortunately, we've just never been able to have it back. So right now, because we don't have any like really good captains, it's just that Stern Guard tend to be the better option for us to make sure that we're actually babysitting that captain efficiently. The only other one I think that could change here is the Reaver Lieutenant, and that is because of the changes to Battle Shock. Now, with Reavers now Battle Shocking people at their -1 already, the Reaver Lieutenant gives them that extra 3 inches of Terror Troops, which is their aura for reducing leadership. That could actually be quite solid, and to be honest, in certain dispositions, maybe that has play. Overall, I don't think, unless it gets a heck of a lot cheaper, it's worth spending your points on it, in all honesty, which is a little bit of a shame because I do like the Reaver Lieutenant. I think he's great fun. I guess maybe the other one to talk about here is Lazarus. Again, just not good enough. It's a shame because he does actually have a 3-out Feel No Pain to Psychic, and Psychic is obviously going to become a lot more prevalent given that we've got a lot more units that are going to take Psychic because they ignore modifiers in the new 11th edition. So Lazarus would have been really good if he gave that to his unit, but critically he doesn't, and therefore why wouldn't you just take your own Librarian who gives you that 4-up Feel No Pain to Psychic regardless? It's just a little bit disappointing. I think Lazarus needs a bit more work because Fight on Death and that Feel No Pain are very strong abilities, but they're both just kind of meh in this particular context. So let's move on and we'll jump into D tier. So we have in D tier Belial, Deathwing Terminators, Ezekiel, Aggressors, the Ancient, Apothecary Biologus, Brutalis Dreadnought, Captain, Gladiator Reaper, bit harsh, Heavy Intercessors, Invicta Tactical Warsuit, bit harsh, Judicia, Land Raider Crusader, Librarian in Terminator Armor, Outriders, and the Whirlwind. Now, there's some surprise ones in here, I think you'll probably find. Belial being in D tier is a shame because, again, he does have a potentially very impactful ability because Precision has had a big, nice boost. But unfortunately, with it only being on critical wounds, which is when you roll a 6, unless there's some way that we can, give like an anti-infantry, that's less good. Obviously, the time we do get that, it's anti-vehicle, anti-monster. So that's really good, but when are you targeting character? I mean, I think the only exception you'll find there is Morven Val as targeting a monster or vehicle with precision. Possibly some others, but I can't think of maybe some Tyrannid ones as well. But that is very niche. I'm sure there are others, but I think that is quite niche. Deathwing Terminators, I think. It's a shame. Ignoring modifiers is nice. I think that's definitely a bit of a glow up for them, given the change that we have to cover. Unfortunately, I think they just, being 3 wounds, it just kind of feels lacking still. They might get a very significant drop in points. They are one of those units that I could see. I have heard that Assault Terminators are likely to get quite a significant drop, but 3 wounds and 4 wounds, very different. Next, we've got Ezekiel. Ezekiel is one that I want to be good, but again, he's probably going to go up in points because he's a Librarian, and his battle shocking of everyone around him is a little problematic when he dies. Because if that completely screws you over and you battle shock a bunch of your army, and then you fail your battle shocks again when you try and unbattle shock, that's when things can go pear-shaped. And obviously, if you are battle shocked, you cannot use insane bravery on yourself. You can only do that while you're unbattle shocked. So that's why those out of normal battle shock phase abilities are a lot better, or in this case, a lot worse because it affects you. I'm trying to think of the other spicy ones here. Probably the Gladiator Reaper is quite a spicy one to be in D tier. I think that is partly because we will see fewer large blocks of infantry, but we've also seen in one of the Games Workshop articles that large 20-man units will be reducing in cost. So actually, maybe we will still see them, and the Gladiator Reaper might sort of creep up those polls. It does just depend a little bit on how good it is when it comes to fighting against infantry. We know obviously it's exceptional against infantry, but is it going to be able to fight enough infantry? Are people going to be spamming infantry, or are they more than likely going to be opting for vehicles? And in all honesty, with the way that Hidden and the way that Go to Ground works, I just think the speed of the Reaper does work against it. Now, the Librarian and Terminator armor is probably another interesting one because I think there are cases where you would use this, particularly as a Dark Angel player. There's definitely lists that I have written that have a Librarian and Terminator armor in there because the Librarius detachment is an incredibly solid one and it gives Deathwing Knights the psychic keyword, which I think is definitely worth reviewing. However, we are still paying the character tax on Deathwing Knights. Again, this one depends on points. It might be that the Librarian and Terminator armor suddenly massively rockets up to like a B tier if the Deathwing Knights or Assault Terminators come down enough in price, because I think Assault Terminators could actually be really very good. And I think between having, say, a Librarian and Terminator armor, an Ancient, and then maybe, I mean, you at this point you're playing Iron Hands, but you could play Hammer of Averni with an Ancient in there as well, which reses the Terminators, and suddenly that is a terrifying unit. So I think there's some scope, and I think there's some play. But equally, currently the Librarian is just not quite cutting it, and it is likely to go up in points because it is a psychic model as well. Trying to think if there's anything else. The Outriders, I guess, they saw some play in 10th edition. They were certainly a unit that I really enjoyed. I've put them a little bit lower down here because they're lacking an invulnerable save, and it's feeling like lacking an invulnerable save and not being hidden with those quite large bases is a little bit more problematic. The way that staging is now working, I think it works quite heavily against Outriders, and that's a little bit disappointing because obviously I do quite like Outriders. I think there will still be combos that you can pull with them. They still give Samael damage 3, which is not bad at all. And they do skirmish quite well. I just think they will dip down compared to, say, Ravenwing Black Knights right now, especially when we get their suspected change with their data sheet and they get a whole lot better and probably get the 4th wound because they become Primaris. Now, I think that kind of sums up D tier. The rest, I don't think there's overly shocking results. Things like maybe the Brutalis, if you are a Brutalis enjoyer, that is because 2-up saves have become a lot less survivable, which is a little bit disappointing. But equally, the Brutalis may come down in points. Is it going to be worth it? We'll see. I don't think so, but equally I would love to be wrong on that because I think it's really still a wonderful model and I love those little talons. In C tier, oh no, I feel like this is going to be the one where I get bitten in the arse quite a lot. We've got Asmodai, Lionel Johnson, the Nephilim Jetfighter, the Ancient in Terminator armor, the Apothecary, Captain in Gravis armor, Captain with Jump Pack, Chaplain in Terminator armor, Bike Chaplain, Jump Chaplain, Gladiator Lancer, and Valiant. People will probably be surprised that that beat the Reaper. Hellblasters, Invader ATV, Predator Annihilator, Reavers, Repulsor, and Terminators. Wow, so C tier, this is the kind of more, I'll probably have 1 or 2 of these units in my list, maybe still a little bit niche, but I think they're still solid. Now you will see every Chaplain in this particular tier. Now, the reason that I've done that is because I think that the Interrogation Conclave is actually still quite good, especially with the fact that it gives us access to Purge the Foe, and +1 to Wound is not that bad. The only slight problem I have with it is I would love to play it with Inner Circle Task Force, and that +1 to Wound is kind of irrelevant when it comes to that, because obviously they're doing it on objectives regardless with +1 to Wound, so that's a bit of a non-bow. The Lion is in C tier because he is still a very solid stat line, but ultimately his tricks are gone. It's a real fall from grace for the son of the first. Well, I guess the father of the first, but it's a real shame to see the Lion kind of brought as low as he has been. And the only real way to fix it right now without a complete rewrite to the Lion is very low points. I'm not sure what I would put the Lion at, but if he stays above 300, then I don't think you'll ever see him. Maybe we're going to see him back down to that sort of 285, 280. Will that be enough? With the changes, it's still real tough. I think it would be up to B tier if that was the case. again, it is very difficult. One of the maybe more surprising ones that you're seeing in C tier rather than a lower tier is the Nephilim Jetfighter. The reason that the Nephilim Jetfighter in here is partly because it is a Ravenwing flyer, and that combos really nicely with Dark Flight Pursuit. And because it combos nicely with Dark Flight, what I'm thinking is that with the changes to cover, Strength 5, AP 1, Damage 2 is probably one of the best ways to clear out chaff. And also there are ways that you can play that in Purge the Foe. So with the Nephilim Jetfighter being able to maybe come in from turn 1, if you give it the enhancement, suddenly you can do a heck of a lot of damage to all those early scoring units, dealing with the early units that the counter Purge lists need to be able to kind of interrupt you, keep you at a distance, all that kind of thing. But the Nephilim hunts them down very well. And because it has that -1 to hit and it's very easy to give it cover, you're going to be causing lots of problems for your opponent. Also, -1 to wound against other fly when everyone's taking fly. I really like that. I think it's a very solid little vehicle. Will it go up in points? Maybe. But at the moment, it's fine. So that's why it's ended up in C tier. One of the other surprises is maybe the Lancer and Valiant. Now, the reason the Lancer and Valiant have made it into C tier rather than a lower tier is because of the towing into terrain and what they're going to be shooting at. They, of course, are going to be targeting more vehicles and monsters and tough stuff. Yes, the Lancer very much still has the same problems. However, I do think if there is a tank datasheet that should go down in points, it is 100% the Gladiator Lancer. If it suddenly goes down to 140 points, then maybe we're having a conversation. You know, it becomes a little bit more worth it. Is it going to be crazy worth it? Remains to be seen. It depends how many points it is. I'm still not sure. Hellblasters, they are benefiting from the change to cover and the fact that there is now a plasma detachment as well. They are still 2-wound Marines. That is not ideal, but it's not bad at the same time. I'd be interested to see what happens with their points. If they dip down in points, I think that could be really good. Similarly, Reavers I actually quite like. I think there's some play there. You know, now that they've got this ability to battle shock a little bit more efficiently, and they're not bad at skirmishing, I think they could do stuff for certain dispositions. So your kind of recon or disruption, I think they've got some serious play there, because if they're battle shocking units that are trying to come and nick objectives off you, that could be very good. Terminators again, I think are one. It's tough. It's really tough with them because they might see some play, but I really like again, they need to go down in points quite significantly. But right now, I mean, maybe I was overly kind to put them in C tier. It's a really difficult one, I would say. And I'm not sure how crazy happy I am with them actually in C tier. I like the Ancient and Terminator armor here because in the Unforgiven task force, you can give him the enhancement that gives the 6-up Feel No Pain to Deathwing Knights or to a massive blob of Assault Terminators. And then if they're battle shocked, they're getting it on 4s. 4-up Feel No Pains for Terminators sounds absolutely disgusting. So I really like that. The Apothecary also made it into C tier mainly because of the Inner Circle companions. ICCs are incredible, and because he's a support character, he can join the likes of a Librarian or Azrael and sort of really get that benefit of bringing back ICCs. And because they're so tough to kill, I think that's a really nice little move. I want to test out like kind of a Wrath of the Rock build, which is 18 ICCs, Azrael, 2 Librarians, and 3 Apothecaries, and see what that really looks like, because I think there could be some real play there, depending on how the points shake out. Because if you're hitting them on 5s, if you're a Space Marine, that's got to be quite upsetting. Dealing with that unit is hard. Now, this is where things start getting real spicy. These are the units that you are far more likely to want to include in your army. And I think there's some really interesting ones here. So we've got Deathwing Knights, Ravenwing Command Squad, Samael, Assault Intercessors, Jump Pack Intercessors, the Ballistus Dreadnought, Blade Guard Veterans, Centurion Devastators, Desolation Marines, Eliminators, Infernus Marines, Land Raiders, Lieutenant Phobos Lieutenant, Predator Destructors, Redemptors, and Assault Terminators. Now, I think, to be honest, we could kind of dig into any of these data sheets and get a really interesting conversation. But let's start with Deathwing Knights, because obviously they were somewhere between S and A tier ever since they got their data sheet rewrite. It's a shame to see how the mighty have fallen, but in all honesty, it's a little bit that slow melee is just not quite where it needs to be right now. I think they're still solid. I think you can still get good play out of them. However, they're not going to be that show-stopping unit that I think we were so used to, especially now that they're not comboing with cover to get that extra reduction to AP coming in to hit them. So that AP1 now is actually going to sting them quite a fair bit. And you will want your AOCs up to protect them. The Ravenwing Command Squad and Samael, I've put in B tier because I think there's some real potential here. Company of Hunters is one that I want to explore, and I think Ravenwing in general are looking really solid. So I'm interested to see how those two units perform, and overall, I think they're pretty darn good. I think that we might see them in a few armies, but I don't think they're going to be staples for Dark Angels moving forward. Assault Intercessors and JPIs are just really solid skirmish. I quite like the Assault Intercessors and JPIs now because heavy bolt pistols had a bit of a glow up because of cover as well. Now that -1 AP is actually quite meaningful for those pistols, and them being 18-inch range is no bad thing either. It's kind of wild that they're randomly 18-inch range, but like, you know, I'm not going to complain because it's quite useful. We've got Desolation Marines in B tier, which may surprise some of you. And the reason for that is they are going to have a very considerable points drop, I think, quite soon. And I think the fact that also, yeah, sure, you just need a spotting unit to make sure they're hitting on 4s and they're ignoring cover. There's a lot of good stuff about them. I think there's some real potential here for Desolation Marines. I don't know if they'll be as good in Dark Angels as they will in other particular factions, but I think there's definitely some scope for us to use these guys and use them to great effect. Next, we've got the Infernus Marines are actually quite a spicy one. Infernus Marines is because of Battle Shock. I quite like the ability to start Battle Shocking things at a lower threshold. I think, you know, debuffing their leadership is a really good thing. If you're anything like me, you might struggle to roll a 7 on 2 dice. It's particularly difficult, I find. But equally, I think the Eliminators and Phobos Lieutenant are very interesting because they have move, shoot, move, and coupling that with the new land speeder, I think is pretty awesome. I've been impressed with that so far. Move, shoot, move in 11th edition seems a lot better because of the ability to just tow into a bit of terrain, shoot, and then run away. I think that's really solid, and I think that maybe something like a Phobos Lieutenant and a Phobos Librarian with a squad of Eliminators, that could actually be a very potent unit in Librarius detachments with its move, shoot, move, 12-inch deep strike, deny, and lone op. I think there's something to that. We'll have to wait and see. That might also just be too many units. Obviously, the Phobos Librarian may go up in points, but equally, I just think move, shoot, move is a really good ability as we go into 11th. We've also got Assault Terminators in this brick. Now, Assault Terminators being here is because, like, you know, they're not as good as Deathwing Knights. However, if what I have heard is correct with their points drops, they are well worth it. And I think being able to take them in 10 bricks at the cost that we're going to be spending is a very good thing. Are we going to get as much use of them as, say, an Ultramarine, where they can put 10 with Calgar? Maybe not, but equally 10 of them with a Librarian in Librarius could do really nasty stuff. That extra move, the sustained hits on those Thunderhammers, there's a lot more to it, and I think that that is something that would be worth exploring. And I think also because they immediately come with that Deathwing keyword, there's scope for them to be good in, say, Inner Circle Task Force, maybe even Lion's Blade. There's like plenty of ways that we could make these guys quite good. And I think just having a 4-up invuln is very useful in the new edition as well. So let's jump into A tier. Now, I think A tier is quite an interesting one. There's a lot of options in A tier. And arguably, some of these could have got into S tier. Arguably, some of S tier maybe will end up being A tier and vice versa. But I really wanted to break this down. So we have got Ravenwing Black Knights, the Landspeeder Vengeance, Eradicators with Bolters, Eradicators, Impulsor, Inceptors, Incursors, Infiltrators, Intercessors, the Land Raider Redeemer, Repulsor Executioner, Scouts, Stern Guard, Storm Raven, Storm Speeders, Vanguard Vets, and the Vindicator. So, Ravenwing Black Knights being in A tier is probably quite a big shock. Now, the reason that they are now in A tier is because I genuinely believe that the changes to Hazardous for them are so impactful. They're no longer killing themselves if they roll a 1. It's the same for those Inceptors. It's really big, and they now can do so much more damage with that overcharging. They're quick, they're efficient, they combo well with the detachments that we want to be playing, and I've been impressed with them so far, especially now they've got a 5-up invuln. At times in 10th edition, a 5-up invuln kind of felt irrelevant because most things weren't pushing you past a 5-up save anyway. But actually, now a lot more things are pushing you up to or past a 5-up save. All plasma is pushing you to a 6 if you are a standard marine. These guys obviously don't need to worry about that. The Landspeeder Vengeance being in A tier is maybe a little harsh. So the reason that the Landspeeder Vengeance, I think it is truly exceptional. I think it's one of our best units as Dark Angels players. The only downside I find with it is the change to Hazardous, because it's a vehicle, yes, but it's a very light on wound vehicles and it's only T8. If it does 3 mortal wounds to itself, it's going to get unhealthy real damn quick, especially when it's doing it now on 1s and 2s. Little bit of a pain in the backside there. Now, obviously, we do have Dark Flight Pursuit where we will be able to re-roll that Hazardous roll, and that is going to give that little bit more consistency, and that's where I think this Landspeeder really thrives, when it's ignoring cover, re-rolling number of shots, and re-rolling any Hazardous rolls. I think overall it's a really solid bit of kit, but that change to Hazardous just dipped it down into A tier. Next, we've got the Eradicators with Bolters. Now, people might be going, why on earth are heavy bolters here? And the reason that I've gone for them is because the 5-1-2 profile seems very impactful in 11th edition compared to previous editions. I think we are looking at a heavy bolter / autocannon meta because they just seem very solid. But from what I have heard about their points, this unit is criminally undercosted, and I think it's going to be phenomenally good at clearing out chaff and one of the cheapest units in the codex. And that is why it sneaks into A tier. Inceptors we've kind of already covered because of the Landspeeder Vengeance. Eradicators are an interesting one, but that's because now we can bring them in from reserve within Melter range, and they are also Oath of Moment agnostic. Because they reroll all their hits, that's also going to be very good against cover, and rerolling all those wounds is just very nice into those vehicles. It forces your opponent to bunch up those softer targets in the middle. So overall, I think this is a really nice one. And to be honest, maybe it could be the nice little hiding spot for a captain in Gravis armor with ancient weapons. I think that could be a nice little addition. The Impulsor, I think, is quite important for delivering a lot of our options. We don't have access to as much advance and charge or advance and do stuff because we aren't playing Gladius or Stormlance because they're 3 DP. So instead, I think an Impulsor to deliver the goods to market is far more impactful and quite useful in general. With that firing deck as well, it's just pretty solid because the units that are in there can get those shots out, cause some havoc, and then when they die, well, when the transport dies, they've not shot yet. So they'll still have hidden, which is really quite nice. Next, we've got Infiltrators. I've found the up-down ability to be absolutely class. That's why Scouts are in here as well. So having something that can deny where your opponent can come in from reserves, I think is very impactful. I think 90% of lists that I've written have had Infiltrators in. They are a phenomenal little unit, and they're very good in the Librarius detachment with the Phobos Librarian as well, just giving them those extra bonuses, maybe 2 inches of extra movement, all that kind of thing. Overall, they're a really nice little addition. And I've been impressed with them so far. They've performed at a really good rate. They're not very killy, but like the positions that they deny, I think is very, very important. Land Raider Redeemer, I think, is going to go up, and that is because of, potentially it's more because of Salamanders. Salamanders are definitely using that to the best of their abilities, and Vulcan Heastan has been absolutely gifted to 11th edition. He is probably one of the best core marine codex data sheets out there, because you can put that tiny little base on a tiny little outcrop behind a wall and put 10 OC on an objective. That is huge. So it might be that the Land Raider Redeemer, I've got some rose-tinted glasses on because A, I love Land Raider Redeemers, but B, I think they're very good with Vulcan. But the reason they're A tier for me is their Overwatch potential. Now that you can't re-roll hits in Overwatch, Torrent becomes a lot more relevant. And if you've ever fired a Land Raider Redeemer in Overwatch, you will know exactly what I mean. It is a big, chunky lad. It's got smoke. It causes problems. Overall, I've been very impressed with the Land Raider Redeemer whenever I've played it. It is 285 points. It is expensive. It's why it maybe kind of fell out of favor. I'm hoping maybe it gets a little points drop. If it does, though, it will probably be going pretty swiftly back up. The Repulsor Executioner, I think, is just a really solid one, especially if you can give it that extra AP. That's just going to be an absolute chaff clearance machine. Phenomenal at doing that. Same with the Storm Raven. I think the Storm Raven is even better, though, because it combos with all the Ravenwing Flyer stuff that we really like. And I've been very impressed with it so far. I think the fact that it's lost aircraft and now just goes 14 is a little bit of a shame. It's not going as fast, but it can take to the sky and fly through walls. And that is definitely a movement gain. So I think aircraft in general aren't the best, but I like the Storm Raven, especially now that it is no longer an aircraft, and it can drop our good friend, the Dreadnought is it? The Redemptor Dreadnought into the battlefield, which I think is also a very strong ability. The new Vanguard vets, I think, are pretty solid. I think will be very interesting to see how that data sheet shakes out when we actually know what war gear they can take. If they can't take all their war gear options, they very quickly fall down the tiers, and I think that's very important to remember. But overall, I think these guys could be really solid. And then finally, the Vindicator is just really good. I've just found it very solid because it's very easy to tag things up in 11th edition. And if you are looking to kind of hold an objective, tow into it, and then shoot, happy days. So I think there's something to it. The Vindicator still feels like a very powerful data sheet. Obviously, it's taken a little bit of a nerf with 2-up saves being less good, but equally, I think there's still places for it. And then finally, we are going to jump into S tier. Now, this is a nice and simple one. And a lot of this comes down to the early winners of disposition. But one that certainly doesn't, and one that is absolutely the GOAT, is Azrael. Azrael is phenomenal. Being able to keep your CP economy going and allowing you to hold additional secondary cards is incredible. Not having to discard them to gain CP is just going to keep all of those engines running. Being able to score more of those cards later in the game because you don't have to worry about that CP is honestly invaluable. And I think every Dark Angels list will start by adding Azrael into it. He is just the best. Full stop. Incredible. Inner Circle Companions come in at a close second, I think, in terms of the best data sheet that we have available to us. And that is because they are technically most of the time -2 to hit. And that is because of the change to cover and how that interacts with -1 to hit their ability. When the cover becomes a modifier to your ballistic skill, it then combos with -1 to hit, which ultimately means that Space Marines are hitting these guys on 5s. That makes them so tanky, especially if they take the little fella below, the Librarian, and give themselves a 4-up invuln. Alongside that, you can combo that with the Librarius detachment to then give them -1 strength when they're being shot, which is even better because suddenly things that take that breakpoint of like strength 5 will go down to strength 4. And that could be pretty critical. We've seen it with a lot of things that are like marine killers and they're strength 8. Suddenly taking that down to strength 7 and wounding them on 3s, you're reducing that efficiency really nicely. The Librarian in general is a very good model and really good lubricant for the Librarius detachment in general. He is probably the best Psyker available to Dark Angels. I think Tigurius, however you pronounce it, is probably the best Psyker overall in the Space Marine sort of ecosystem, but overall the Librarian is incredibly solid. Keeping on Librarians, I think the Phobos Librarian is also very good. That ability to sort of loan up a unit the whole time, give a psychic buff out, a psychic feel no pain as well, I think is quite relevant, and also always have cover. I think that's pretty solid. I've been overall pretty impressed with the Phobos Librarian, especially when it comes to leading infiltrators. And I think he earns his place, I think, there. And if people do suddenly start playing a bit more indirect, then suddenly he becomes even more relevant. Then we've got the Lieutenant with Combi Weapon. I've kind of spoken about how incredible reactive moves are in 11th edition, and that is because if your opponent ends 2.1 inches away, which is the closest they can end outside of engagement range, and you reactive, you're full 6 inches away, you are 8.1 inches away. At that point, they have a 9-inch charge. That is nuts, because most people are never going to risk something like that. And that is, so the best they can ever do is a 9, which is crazy to think. Like, how on earth are people going to catch this guy? They've got to shoot him. So against those combat armies that don't want to be shooting and want to stay hidden, this guy is incredible at baiting out their shots, because they will not get rid of the Combi Lieutenant, who is already an incredible data sheet and great little point scorer, because he is so slippery with that reactive move. Staying on reactive moves, I think the move shoot move land speeder is just incredible. It has so many shots, and for the points value that I've been told, it's well worth it. You know, having a random las cannon shot, then a couple of melters, and then a minigun, moving 14, probably ignoring cover because you're probably in dark flight. Like, there's some really good stuff. And then finally, we've got suppressors. Now, suppressors are a data sheet that have not really seen the light of day in a very, very long time, and for good reason. They were absolutely terrible in 10th edition, and they've not got their own individual box. However, much like the Inner Circle Companions, because of the way that cover interacts with -1 to hit, these guys are a menace. And also, when I've already mentioned the fact that that kind of autocannon heavy bolter profile is as good as it is, that really suits suppressors, because they are an 8-1-2 profile, so they will cut through opposing Marines incredibly efficiently, meaning that that little 75-point investment is well worth it. They also have the smoke keyword, which can be very useful for making sure that everyone's got cover behind them and keeping that going where they're causing that bit of havoc. So there we go. There is my full tier list of all things Space Marine. This is probably a very long video, so if you're here at the end, congratulations. I hope you've enjoyed it. I will be bringing out plenty more 11th edition content as we learn more, because I myself am playing currently into the WTC this year, so that is the World Teams Championship. So hopefully I'll actually know what I'm talking about by then, which I think will be quite critical when you're going up against the other best players in the world. A little bit scary that, but we move. I think overall we've got a really good set of data sheets, and we are spoilt for choice at this point. So get out there, get exploring, talk to people, talk to me, get in the Discord and have a chat with everyone, and you'll find out what works best for you. But most importantly, remember, stay loyal, brothers. We'll see you in the next one.